to me of heaven, sing that song of peace. From the toils that bind me, it will bring release. Burdens will be lifted at our pressing soul. Showers of great blessing o'er my heart will flow. Sing to me of heaven, let me fondly drink of its golden glory, of its early gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven's sweetest songs of all. Sing to me of heaven tenderly and low, till the shadows o'er me rise and swiftly go. When my heart is weary, when the day is long, sing to me of heaven, sing that old sweet song. Sing to me of heaven, let me fondly drink of its golden glory, of its early gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven, sing the sweetest song of all. Song after us will be 561. 561.
Good evening. I appreciate Virgil filling in for me the other day. I was supposed to be able to be here to do a Devo and got called out of town on official business, of course, but appreciate him filling in for me so that I didn't skip it. When I was a youngster, sorry I don't have any Play-Doh tonight. When I was a youngster, I loved spending time with my grandparents. I had two grandpas that lived about 3 miles from my house. And my two favorite places to go in the world, number one, were Poor Boy Livestock Auction in Worcester, Oklahoma. If you like cheeseburgers, not to be confused with the new Poor Boy they rebuilt a couple years ago, but the original orange and white Poor Boy had the greatest cheeseburger on planet Earth. My second favorite place to go, when my grandpas would let me ride along with them, was to go to the feed store. Has anybody in here ever been to Enos Feed Store in Wilburton back when it was open? Some of you know Buddy Enos, married to Beverly Enos here in town. Buddy's mom and dad ran a feed store in Wilburton for, I don't know, Leland, how long? 80 years? 75 years? Forever. It's kind of a nostalgic little feed store. When you walk in, you literally would have to part the cigarette smoke because they both smoked nonstop. They'd put out one and light another one, but they had a pop machine in the back over against the wall. It was always smoky. It was always 97 degrees in there, a little propane stove. It could be in the summertime. They were little elderly people that like things hot, so it was always hot. So if you went in the feed store, first thing you think of, hey, I gotta get something to drink. It's hot in here. They had one of these little bitty Coke boxes that you could put your, back then, 50 cents in, and you had to open the door and twist the knob. You guys remember those? And if you did it just right, you could get a little Dr. Pepper or a Coke that was, what, 8 or 10 ounces? Little bitty fellas. But they were ice cold. Those old pop machines are way better than these new fancy ones. You had to use the deal, flick your wrist to knock that, because you couldn't twist the top off. But nothing was better than getting a Dr. Pepper or a Coke with my grandparents going to the feed store. Many of you have nodded along and obviously know what I'm talking about. Do any of you remember what the bottles used to say back when they were glass, not plastic? Do you remember what they used to say on the back of those bottles? On the back of all those bottles, it would have something to the effect of no deposit, no return. If you finished your pop and put it back in the crate, you'd get 10 cents back of your 50 cents. You know, we live in a society now where everything is disposable. Used to, you could buy a washer and dryer would last 20 years. How long does one last these days? 5 or 6 years? A microwave lasted the whole time I was growing up. Now we go through one every 4 or 5 years. No deposit, no return. Something that simple also has lots of applications to us as Christians. You know, not only as a congregation, but to us individually. Bob's done a very good job keeping it to the front of our mind lately about personal evangelism, sharing the word with others around us. What can we do as a church to get more people involved in order to share the word not only throughout our neighborhood, but also through the mission efforts and the other things that we support? As we do those things, do we give a lot of thought to what we can do? And the reason I bring this up is not to anybody else but me, because I have a real good ability to stay focused on what Troy's interested in and what benefits Troy, but sometimes I get a little lost on some of the other stuff. I can usually make it to church on Sunday and Wednesday, unless something I want to do gets in the way, but how intentional are we? When was the last time we asked if we could participate? Hey, what can I do to help out? You know, and this congregation is an anomaly in our area. You know, we have more people here on a Wednesday night than a lot of our congregations in surrounding counties have on Sunday morning. We have a lot of people that are involved in many different ways. A couple quick examples, the breakfast we had the other day. First time in my life I ever had church breakfast. Why hadn't we been doing that for years? I love a good breakfast. You know, the second was the trunk or treat. You guys were able to get so many people involved with the trunk or treat. Even Leland got in on the action. When I first heard that, I thought, man, he's going to scare them kids. Nobody wants to get candy from a grouchy old man. But even Leland got to participate in the trunk or treat. You know, in terms of personal evangelism, you know, it's a scary topic. It's a little bit taboo for us to talk to people about the Word. All of us have opportunities to visit one-on-one with people that we know, maybe family, friends, neighbors. But how often do we really look for that? How often do we get out of our shell and really pursue the opportunity to share that with others? I'm guilty of going the other way more times than not. More times in my life, I've led people the wrong way instead of back to the Bible and the teachings of Christ. You know, we're a collection of individuals. You know, I'm not the biggest basketball fan in the world, but I do like guys that have been successful. Mike Krzyzewski, that coached at Duke for a long time, was one of my favorite coaches. And you always, every time you watched him play, they always got after it. He was never a controversial guy. He was never in the media for doing something silly. He was never brought up on charges. He never had to be brought out for recruiting violations. He was a guy that stuck to business and really was a good coach and a very good mentor. One thing that he would always tell his teams that I watched on one of the documentaries about him was he compared a basketball team to a hand. With a hand, you got one finger. If you're trying to harm someone, there's a limit to what you can do with one finger. You may be able to poke them in the eye, but you're not going to knock somebody down with one finger. But as a basketball team, the same way, one individual playing may be an all-star, but if he doesn't have another group surrounding him, there's a limit to what you can do. His philosophy was if you took 5 players and made a fist, you could knock somebody down. And his teams always got after it. Do we ever think about that as a congregation? Do we ever think about that in our personal life? I'm the world's worst about not thinking about that. Came to church, did my duty, helped on the table, might have done a prayer, off to get chicken, fast as I can get there. Want to beat them Baptists. Don't want them to run out of them little chicken chunks. I want to give you a couple examples of normal people that have been in my life that have made a big influence on me in terms of personal evangelism. We lived down the street from a guy that had a hard life. He was in construction. He had kids a little older than me, but his health was always bad. And as he aged, you know, he liked to sit on the porch. And he was a snappy dresser. He always had on his bib overalls. And if you drove by, you know, I could bet you $20 he'd be on the front porch if it was daylight. And if you drove by, he might wave at you. You know, and if you've been south Panola, Oklahoma on that highway in the last 20 years, I promise you, you've seen this guy I'm talking about. But one guy that you would not think of could touch somebody's life. But for years, I would drive to work, drive home to work. He'd give me one of these. Wave at me. You know, I could be having some personal struggles. Sometimes I've been out of shape in the world. Doesn't matter who's in the way, I'm mad at them too. Jen can tell you all about it. Could be something at work. Could be somebody I work with. Could be one of my kids. Might be cattle out. Something going wrong in my life. I'm grumpy as I can get. And I could drive by and he would do this. And I would wave at him. Completely changed my perspective. You know, he passed away not long ago. But that guy didn't raise his children in the church. They were not overly religious. But as he aged and as they aged, one of his sons and I have been friends since the third grade. One of my only childhood friends that I stay in contact with. His son is one of my heroes. He is one of the most devout Christian men and one of the best parents that I've ever met. Didn't come from a well-to-do family, hasn't done anything, you know, in business, not educated, but he is educated on the Word. And I can be having the worst day in the world and just at my wit's end, and I can drive by and Mr. Adams would wave at me. You know, I wish one more time I would have stopped by and told him how much I appreciated that. He passed away a few years ago. I pulled in to talk to his son one day, and he said, "Who is that?" I said, "Hey, it's Troy." He said, "Oh, I didn't know that was you." Here I thought for 20 years he's been waving at me in one of my white pickups. He didn't even know who I was, but he was waving. Something as insignificant as a kind gesture. Man, that opens the door for us. Do we think about stuff like that? If I meet you on the road, I may or may not wave. I may be texting. Leland may be texting me. You never know. Think about those kind of things. I've got another example of a friend that was a very average ag teacher. If you hear him tell it, he was a magnificent performer. But he really is pretty darn average at his job. But his side hustle was evangelism. And he's talked to me about different things, and I had no idea he was going to retire. I knew he was going to retire because of his age, but he told me he was going to be a full-time evangelist, and I thought, I didn't even know he was an evangelist. This guy's been to 20 or 30 countries. He has spoke to thousands of people, mostly in Africa. And here, a year or two ago, he hit me up about a project, was looking for somebody to sponsor a talkback TV. Now, everybody here in this room probably has a bigger television than I got. I don't have a huge one, just normal size. My living room's pretty small. But he needed a TV. Asked a couple people to make a donation, $300 or $400 a piece, to get a TV. I'm like, what do they need a TV in Africa for? They all got cell phones. He wanted a TV so he could sit in Arpaler, Oklahoma, talk and teach over the computer to young ministers in Africa. I would have never dreamed. When I think of Africa, I think of National Geographic. I want to see the animals. Why didn't I think about sharing the word with almost 1 billion people that are over there? Never even dawned on me. A few months later, after he had gone to Uganda or the Congo and came back, he said, you know, this morning before I came over here to a pig show, he said, time's different. He said, I was meeting with over 100 ministers about the word. 100 ministers from all these different fragmented villages and small places. How many people will those 100 ministers touch in a week or in a lifetime? Why don't I think of that? Never crosses my mind because I'm too busy with my blinders on, my daily schedule, my routine, Got to make money, got to pay the bills, got to go to work, put it off as long as I can, then I go to work. What if I got up an hour early? What could I do? What if I look for ways to help other people in our community? Now, we're close to Thanksgiving and Christmas, the time things like that usually cross our mind. Why don't we think about that the rest of the year? What a great time that we have. Our country is in a period, a reset is about to happen in multiple areas of society. Can we use these opportunities to do some of those same things? You know, not long ago, I believe Virgil in one of his classes touched on the parable of the sower. And the parable of the sower, for those of you that may not know, most probably do, is found in Luke chapter 8. You know, in Luke, well, all through the New Testament, Jesus uses parables to help prove a point or to make people give pause to things that they've thought about. And I've always been interested in the parable of the sower. You know, the farmer, or whatever you would like to call him, went out, sowed some seeds, scattered some seeds out. Some fell along the path, some fell along the rocky places, some fell where there were thorns, and some landed on the good soil. Now, those of you that are from south of Stigler know that there's lots of places with thin soil and lots of places with briars, tares, thorns. We can identify with that. Not a lot of good soil, but there's some. You know, the parable isn't talking as much about the seed and what happens to the seed, it's the opportunity. You know, with my two examples of who we can share this information with, any of those people could be any one of the four. But we won't know unless we get out of our comfort zone and try to share that with those around us. Some of the seed was picked up by the birds. Nothing became of it. Some came up fast. The ground dried up, withered away, and died. We all know people like that. I've got family like that. Knew about the Word, grew up in the Word, fizzled out. Maybe they'll come back. Pray about it every day. Some of it was choked out by the thorns. If you have a telephone or a television, how many thorns are out there? We can't turn on the television and pay very much attention or scroll through social media without seeing all these distractions, all these problems surround us in the world. Now, enough of the negativity. We are given an opportunity to share that with other people. And we never know. It may be as simple as a wave. It may be visiting with somebody from somewhere else about a way to reach people. You may have one of the best, most in-depth conversations about religion and your soul with some insignificant person that you've overlooked with one of their children. They might have that influence on one of your children one of these days. So, I would like you all to get pause and think about that and look for ways to get involved, number one. Number two, always look for ways that we can prioritize and share the Lord's Word with other people. Now, as always, if you're not happy with your situation, if you need prayers of the church, if you're dealing with stuff, or you need to put on Christ in baptism, we're given this opportunity to do so as we stand and sing.
The voice of the Savior says, come. The cross where he died is inside. Him now at the cross there is truth. Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? The bride and the Spirit in mind. Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Oh, who to himself will be true. The voices invite. Who answers, my brother, to you? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming
Please help us take it to heart, apply it to our daily lives. Go with us now for our separate ways, keep us safe, and those that are here Sunday morning. Forgive us all our sins, in Jesus' name.